only on the Pulse of Africa channel. Pulse of Africa, the face and voice of Africa.
Hello and welcome. I'm Gumechisa Mandida and this is POA Daily News. Stay with us for in-depth coverage of the stories shaping our region and the world. First, the UN. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres addressed the African Union and European Union summit, warning that the world is shifting toward a multipolar system which, without strong cooperation, risks fueling rivalry in a state of balance. Guterres argued that the two continents can form a central axis to shape a fairer global order, correcting historic injustices and giving historically marginalized nations a real voice in global decision-making. The Secretary General's first priority for joint action is to reform the global financial system, which he labeled unfair and ineffective. He noted that many African nations are burdened by unsustainable debt that stifles domestic investment. Guterres called on the AU and EU to work together to end this debt trap, triple the lending capacity of multilateral development banks, and grant development nations greater influence over global finance to address poverty and the root causes of irregular migration.
Global financial architecture is both unfair and ineffective. It favors already wealthy nations. We must reform it for everyone's benefit. And this means ending the crushing debt cycle, tripling the lending capacity of multilateral development banks, and giving developing countries, many of them in Africa, greater participation and influence in the global financial institutions as part of the reform of the international financial architecture to adapt it to today's world.
Guterres emphasized turning Africa's immense climate potential into economic opportunity. Africa possesses vast solar and wind resources, along with the critical minerals essential for clean energy technologies, demand for which is expected to triple by 2030. He proposed a genuine clean energy partnership where Africa utilizes Europe's capital and know-how to move beyond exporting raw materials and instead building domestic processing and manufacturing industries for shared long-term growth. The third area of focus is reforming the global peace and security system. Guterres referenced the Pact for the Future, which advocates for permanent African seats on the UN Security Council.
The Pact for the Future, adopted last year, calls for permanent seats for Africa on the United Nations Security Council to ratify a deep historic injustice and strengthen the Council's ability to deliver peace across the globe. I repeat my call for sustainable, flexible and predictable funding for African Union-led peace operations as endorsed by Security Council Resolution 2719. And I commend the European Union for their direct engagement and for advocating this over the past decades.
He stressed that this move is essential to correct a deep historic injustice and is necessary to improve the Council's ability to respond effectively to modern crises, making global governance structures more representative and functional. He asserted that the world requires interconnected multipolarity, driven by joint efforts to reform finance, accelerate climate action and reshape security structures. He emphasized that by driving these changes, Africa and Europe have the unique capacity to transform the current global turbulence into a new era of hope. Moving to the African Development Bank, the African Development Bank Group has urged global climate and institutions to strengthen collaboration and sustained coordination to help developing countries successfully implement their nationally determined contributions (NDCs). Speaking at the 5th Partners Roundtable on NDC implementation at the COP30 in Belém, Brazil, Dr. Alhamundo Dorosoma of the African Union Bank Group stated that Africa's challenge is not ambition, but the lack of resources required to deliver on its climate commitments. The African Development Bank Group's call came during a roundtable that brought together development financing institutions, global climate funds, and UN agencies to review financing pledges and identify ways to get climate finance to the most vulnerable communities. The Executive Secretary of the UNFCCC, Simon Still, underscored the urgency, warning that the cost of climate inaction will far exceed the cost of action and calling on developed countries and the private sector to significantly step up their efforts. Despite institutional and financial constraints, 47 African countries have updated and submitted their NDCs, with 23 presenting more ambitious visions ahead of COP30. Representatives at the roundtable highlighted persistent challenges, including resource mobilization, shortfalls and gaps in institutional capacity to implement climate plans effectively and reach vulnerable groups. The African Development Bank is actively working to transition countries from planning to investment through the African Nationally Determined Contributions NDCs Hub. The hub provides support across the continent, assisting countries like Ethiopia in developing bankable NDC projects and securing large-scale financing. More recently, Botswana, Gabon, Lesotho and Liberia received support to craft long-term climate visions aligned with the Paris Agreement goal for 2050. Demonstrating its commitment, the African Development Bank Group mobilized $5.5 billion in climate finance in 2024, with a significant 56% dedicated to adaptation efforts. The bank uses innovative tools such as the Climate Action Window, which raised $451 million in concessional financing, primarily earmarked for adaptation. Noted that while the African Development Bank's Africa Adaptation Acceleration Program, AAAP, has deployed $11.9 billion, private capital remains underutilized for critical adaptation initiatives. Algeria's State Minister and Minister of Hydrocarbons and Mines, Mohamed Arkab, met with Saudi Arabia's Minister of Energy, Prince Abdulaziz bin Salman, on Monday in Riyadh on the sidelines of the 21st General Conference of the United Nations Industrial Development Organization, UNIDO. During the high-level talks, both nations reaffirmed their strong historical ties and expressed a mutual desire to strengthen bilateral cooperation across the hydrocarbons and mining sectors. The discussions focused on capitalizing on promising opportunities for joint ventures and deepening their strategic energy relationship. The ministers specifically reviewed cooperation prospects in several key areas: hydrocarbon exploration and development, the petrochemical industry, and the rapidly emerging field of clean hydrogen. They emphasized the importance of fostering industrial and investment partnerships between their national champions. Beyond direct investment, the talks covered strategic priorities for both countries, including enhancing local content in energy value chains, facilitating knowledge exchange and technology transfer, and improving training and education programs in the oil industry. The goal is to intensify research and innovation to secure the future of their energy sectors. Minister Arkab highlighted Algeria's commitment to implementing energy transition projects aiming to reduce the carbon footprints in its oil and gas sector. This commitment aligns with global efforts demonstrating both nations' focus on modernizing their energy systems while maintaining their roles as major global energy suppliers. Moving to UNICEF, the United Nations Children's Fund, UNICEF, has announced a major new agreement with Gavi, the Vaccine Alliance to significantly reduce the cost of the R21 matrix and malaria vaccine. This step is intended to vastly improve access and affordability, protecting millions more children from one of the world's most fatal diseases. The new deal, financially backed by Gavi and executed by UNICEF, is expected to bring the price of the R21 vaccine down to $2.99 per dose from approximately $4, with the new price taking effect in about 1 year. The resulting savings could generate up to $90 million, allowing for the purchase of over 30 million additional doses and protecting nearly 7 million more children over the next 5 years. The expansion of vaccination is critical as malaria continues to be a devastating public health threat. In 2023, there were an estimated 263 million malaria cases and 597,000 deaths globally. Approximately 95% of these deaths, predominantly children under 5, occurred in the African region, which accounts for over 70% of the world's malaria burden. To date, over 40 million doses of malaria vaccines have been delivered through the Gavi malaria vaccination program. The vaccines are now part of routine immunization schedules in 24 African countries. Treating a single uncomplicated case of malaria in sub-Saharan Africa costs an estimated $4 to $7 per outpatient visit, while a severe case requiring hospitalization can exceed $70. The price reduction aims to make protection highly accessible, preventing both deaths and high treatment costs. Now to business news. Alibaba's Cainiao expands parcel service in Africa as demand for Chinese goods surges. Alibaba Group Holdings Logistics Division, Cainiao, is significantly expanding its small parcel delivery service across Africa to capitalize on the surging demand for Chinese goods. The expansion aims to offer Chinese e-commerce merchants a more reliable and cost-effective way to reach the continent's rapidly growing consumer base. Cainiao has launched its cross-border express service in 8 African countries, including key markets like Morocco, Ghana, and Nigeria. The company has ambitious plans to further extend this service to South Africa and Egypt by the end of December, thereby covering the top 5 African markets in terms of e-commerce penetration. This move is part of China's broader economic influence in Africa. While Cainiao is an Alibaba subsidiary, it also provides services to third-party merchants, directly competing with the services of other major Chinese shopping apps such as Shein and Temu, which have also launched services in selected African markets. The expansion is strategically timed as trade surges between China and Africa. China's total exports to Africa have risen by a significant 26.1% to $180 billion in the first 10 months of this year. Cainiao's investment aims to capture a larger share of this massive and growing cross-border e-commerce trade volume. Moving to the Bank of Ghana, the Bank of Ghana (BOG) is contemplating another interest rate reduction. This consideration comes as inflation has cooled faster than anticipated, leading to high real borrowing costs, which the central bank worries could hinder the nation's economic recovery. The Monetary Policy Committee (MPC) previously made a substantial move in September, slashing the main interest rate by a record 350 basis points to 21.5%. This decision was driven by the sustained decline in inflation from its crisis-level highs. Governor Johnson Asiama noted that while the economy shows strong fundamentals, the sharply rising real interest rates pose a significant challenge. Governor Asiema projected that consumer inflation is likely to settle between 4 to 6% by the end of the year. He stressed the need for a balanced approach. Staff analysis shows scope for gradual easing, but the balance must preserve credibility and avoid undermining the disinflation gains. The Bank of Ghana has been cutting its policy rate in the last 2 consecutive meetings. The next rate decision is expected on Wednesday. Ghana's economy is showing robust signs of moving from recovery to expansion after its recent severe crises. Economic growth hit 6.3% in the first half of 2025. Furthermore, the country's international reserves have reached a multi-year high of $11.41 billion, and the steady currency has maintained broad stability. Finally, sports. NFF launched major overhaul of Super Eagles for AFCON 2025. The Nigeria Football Federation, NFF, has initiated a sweeping overhaul of the Super Eagles squad ahead of the 2025 Africa Cup of Nations AFCON in Morocco. The decision follows the team's recent disappointing results, most notably their failure to qualify for the 2026 FIFA World Cup after a penalty shootout loss to Democratic Republic of Congo. A senior NFF official disclosed that the reforms are necessary to reorganize the national team, stressing the need for younger and more committed players. The federation's new selection criteria are strict. Only players demonstrating strong club form, fitness and genuine commitment will be considered. As part of the restructuring process, Super Eagles head coach Eric Shilley is expected in Abuja for a crucial meeting with NFF technical heads. The goal is to finalize the squad list and set a clearer strategic direction for the team's rebuild before the AFCON training camp opens on December 10. Let's take a look at the current forecast and what conditions to expect across the region. That's all from POA News for the hour. Thank you for joining us and stay tuned for more updates from Africa.